Continuing to trickle on here, but we can go ahead and get started. I know everyone has quite the busy morning on top of a very hectic late night. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sam Paisley, and I'm the comms director here at the DLCC. Joining me today is our DLCC's president, Heather Williams, for our post-election presser. Many of you know our role at this point, but we're going to start out with some brief remarks at the top to kind of set the stage of what we saw last night, how we're thinking about the midterms. If folks could hold on to their questions while Heather is delivering those remarks, that would be great. But we will take questions on a first come, first basis after that. If you are interested in asking a question, please type it into the chat box. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and hand things over to Heather, our president.
Thanks, Sam, and thank you everyone for being here on this exciting post-election morning. As Sam said, we are the DLCC. Our work is to build power in states, work with the campaign in state legislatures all across the country, and we have been building power all year long. Our job is to build really strong programs that are able to be successful in every electoral environment, and that starts with early support and continues all the way through polls close on election night. I think as you all heard at this point, we swept as Democrats everything last night, and more specifically at our ballot level, we protected nearly every target on our map. And in the lead up to last night's election, we'd already protected 7 majorities in 2025. And the earthquake wins last night reaffirmed that voters rebuke GOP extremism and that the affordability crisis remains the issue that is on voters' mind. This is in the context of the government shutdown, but the truth is that the affordability crisis has been on voters' mind all year, and we have seen it in every environment in 2025. And we've been winning because our candidates are out there in red communities, blue communities, and purple communities talking directly to voters about the issues they care most about, and that is absolutely affordability. The other thing that was reaffirmed last night is the backing of Dems in states. This firewall where Democrats have power remains true. This is where we're getting things done. This is where Democrats are leading. We're really excited about what it means for the future. So breaking down last night, starting with Virginia, we swept every target in this state. This is the largest majority in Virginia in 40 years. We flipped 13 seats, and we saw a Democratic shift in almost every county across the state. This matters because first, we had candidates running in every community. These candidates, again, were out there talking directly to voters about their campaign, about Democrats and affordability, about how to lead on behalf of their communities. Harris, in 2024, Harris won 59 of the 100 legislative districts, and Tim Kaine won 62, and we just won 64 seats. Overperformance is real, and we are incredibly excited about what this means for Virginia. We spent over $2 million in these efforts. The caucus program as a whole raised more than $30 million. This was a do not take anything for granted, very disciplined, very strategic campaign effort, and it is indicative of how we are running campaigns all across the country. We are excited about the trifecta that is being delivered in Virginia with now Governor-elect Stamberger, and we know that when they head into session in January, there's going to be a lot of good things happening for Virginians. Moving on to New Jersey, a Democratic supermajority was created in the Assembly. We flipped at least 3 Assembly seats, and we know that voters across the Garden State reinforced this Democratic firewall and connected with Democrats, again, on pricing and affordability all across the state. In Pennsylvania, 3 retention Supreme Court races were secured, meaning that the court in Pennsylvania remains Democrat through the 2030 redistricting. We know that this court's going to have implications beyond redistricting alone. And we feel really great about the efforts there and what it means to have a court that is going to act and reflect Pennsylvania. In Mississippi, a red state, the supermajority was broke in the Senate. We picked up 2 state Senate seats. And really, like, how we look at how we look at Mississippi is this is really like the path to building democratic power broadly. In Virginia, nearly a decade ago, we were close to the super minority. And now we sit in a place where we've got a 64-seat majority. When we think about a state like Mississippi and what it means to break that supermajority, we think about the path to power and the steps that it takes to start building it, and breaking a Republican supermajority is step number 1, and we're really excited about the opportunities there. In Minnesota, through special elections, we protected the state Senate majority. This was really important, both headed into legislative session, but of course, the Minnesota Senate is one of our 1-seat majorities that will be on the ballot in 2026. And this effort secured Democrats' power in that chamber for the near future. And then in California, Prop 50 passed with roughly 63% of the vote, or at least that was the number that I last had. The Prop 50 came out of the state legislature, and this is such an important reminder that redistricting is the job of state legislatures. And this was Democrats in power using their legislative power to think about the future. And this is also why our mission at DLCC to win more majorities matters so much, not just in the context of being able to deliver results to states where we are able to lead, but also in context of everyone else on the ballot, knowing that congressional districts are drawn by state legislatures. This ballot level is so important to the future for Democrats, and this was just one of those indicating events. So broadly, all of our wins come on the heels of Democrats overperforming in special elections all year long. Our candidates are going to continue to have meaningful conversations with voters, focusing on the affordability crisis as we head into the 2026 midterms. But before we get to November, we have critical majority deciding special elections on the horizon in states like Minnesota, Virginia, Michigan, Pennsylvania. These are all a result of the election activity, people moving offices, and those are coming just right around the corner. These races will set the stage for the midterms in November, where we're going to have a stacked map of opportunities across our battleground states. I think it's never been clearer that the center of gravity for meaningful governing that improves people's lives has moved to the states, and the DLCC has the proving winning strategy to carry these campaigns to success. We are very excited to sit here this morning, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. With that, we will now go ahead and open things up for a Q&A session. As I mentioned, we will answer questions on a first come, first serve basis. Please type any questions you have in the chat box. We will kick things off with Mike Board from iHeartRadio. Heather, can you talk a little bit about the nationwide impact of Prop 50 passing in California?
Broadly, Prop 50 demonstrates Democrats using their power to combat this approach that Republicans have taken. And what I mean by that is Republicans are not winning on the issues. They're not paying attention to what voters or their communities care most about. And so the way that they are going to win is by ensuring that politicians are determining the future fate of Congress. We cannot stand idly by and watch Republicans manipulate their power in Congress. And so California is, step one in countering these efforts that Republicans have started and that cannot go unanswered.
Excellent. This next question comes from our friend Hannah Knowles over at the Washington Post. What did the election results say to you about Latino voters And is there anywhere especially notable you'd like to flag related to that?
Hey, Hannah, we are still getting, of course, like a lot of information back. We like to look at election results layered in our districts, and we've got a lot to learn. But I will say broadly, you don't overperform as we did in elections without bringing more people into the coalition. So I think we've got a couple of things that have played a role here. We had really strong candidates, not just in our targets, but across these districts, across these states. We focused again on the issues that mattered most to voters, having direct conversations with voters in dialogue about the affordability crisis broadly. And we welcomed more people into this coalition, and we demonstrated that by doing that, we can expand our voting base and overperform and win big on election night.
Sticking with New Jersey, this next question comes from Madison Fernandez over at Politico. How much do you attribute Cheryl's overperformance to gains in the assembly? And with a supermajority, what priorities do you expect Dems to tackle in the legislature?
We are really excited about our Democratic governor wins. Two incredible women who will now be running the executive offices in those states. I will say, the question of coattails and does the statewide carry the legislature? The evidence tells us no. Certainly it helps to have an incredible candidate at the top of the ticket. Like we will never fight against that. But our work and our effort at this ballot level is, getting into frankly deeply personal and authentic conversations with voters, talking to them directly, and building out support not just for the candidate for our ballot level, but more broadly for Democrats. And we overperformed the top of the ticket in 2024. We're going to see some places where we continue that overperformance this year and in this election. And what I think it's telling us is that a strong Democratic ticket up and down is good for Democrats. And we each must own our sort of unique position and our unique opportunity in our campaigns. And I'm really proud to say that like our candidates last night did just exactly that.
A couple of questions in from Gregory over at Politico. Should last night's results embolden Democratic-controlled states to take up redistricting? And what are you watching for in Virginia now on the redistricting front? What is the DLCC doing to support those efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the takeaways that I have from this process is voters don't want Republicans to rig Congress on their behalf. Like they shouldn't be determining who can control Congress. They should be out there talking about the things that they care about, talking about their success stories and bringing voters along. Obviously Republicans are not interested in that right now. And so the logical answer to that is to find places where Democrats can respond to ensure across the country that voters have a say in their Congress. California, obviously, step one, it went through a process where the voters decided this. The legislature gave them the opportunity, the voters decided. We know that there is discussions happening in a number of other places. We know that Virginia just passed the first step in their constitutional process last week. There's a couple more steps in that process. We'll make sure that people follow along. But I think through all of this, the through line is that Democratic legislatures are the ones that are going to play an active role in this. And it is mission critical for Democrats to pay attention to what is happening in the states, because congressional lines are drawn by legislatures, not just in the district that you live in, but all across the country.
Allie at the Associated Press asks, to what extent are we seeing Americans' concerns about healthcare costs and access factored into the Democratic wins last night? How does the DLCC plan to message around healthcare for upcoming races and the midterms?
I mean, healthcare absolutely plays a role in the affordability crisis. I think it's important to recognize that affordability is not just through the lens of egg prices or gas prices. It is hitting families all across the country in a myriad of ways. And we know that healthcare prices are skyrocketing, that it is pricing people out, and people are making the kinds of decisions that should not be made in a country like the United States about whether or not they are going to afford healthcare, or they are going to afford food on their table, or they are going to afford childcare for their young children. Like we shouldn't be in that position, and we know absolutely that healthcare pricing plays an active role in how people think about their own personal economic opportunity and the affordability crisis that they are experiencing.
Another question from the AP here, this one from David. Turning to Mississippi, you talked a little bit about the path to building Democratic power there. Both seats were new majority minority districts created as a result of a court ruling. Now that the Supreme Court is considering undoing Section 2 of the VRA, would this take away Democrats' path to gaining seats, especially in Southern seats?
Listen, like we need to get out there and compete. And I'm not going to forecast what the court is going to do right now. I'm going to recognize that we had candidates who got out there and connected with their community on the issues that they cared most about. And were able to deliver wins. I think that is the surgical approach that we've had to take at this ballot level. As the environment changes, as everything looks different every election. We've been able to do that successfully. So I think the storyline remains, which is the path to power in states is not ever done in one election. It takes time to build through the power of a state house, which starts by breaking Republican supermajorities, building those majorities, flipping those chambers, and seeing where Democratic power can go from there. Mississippi is the latest example of that. We're going to approach what happens in the environment after this, like head on. But we know that we've got strong campaigns that can connect with voters, and we're going to continue to focus on that.
Next one comes from Carolyn Fiddler. Can you characterize a little bit what RSLC spending looked like, especially in Virginia and New Jersey?
Yeah, hi Carolyn. We saw Republicans play actively here. We saw them play in turnout on behalf of the entire Republican ticket. We saw them play in these races. In fact, the RSLC just came out with a memo panicking a little bit pre-election of what the environment looked like, and restating that they're going to need a lot of resources to connect with voters and to be able to tell the Republican story as they move through this election and into the next. Carolyn, we can follow up on like specifics of what exactly the spend was. I don't have that off the top of my head right now. But we do know that the spending that we saw on our side was incredibly intentional. And I think it built off this notion that we cannot make assumptions about what is happening in this environment and take for granted narratives that say Democrats are well positioned. We have to get out there and fight for every vote and connect with every voter. And the way that we do that is have the candidates on the doors talking directly to voters, and in our targeted districts have a strong communications program that reinforces the path forward for the future and has strong contrasting messaging. And we were able to deliver the necessary programs in Virginia, and that is how these majorities were expanded and built.
Awesome. Combining a few questions in this chat, including from CNN and Indie Politics, can you just talk a little bit more about what you think the takeaways are from last night for both 2026 and 2028?
Oh, we're going into 28. Listen, to me, like the biggest takeaway and the way that I think about this is expanding a little bit on what I just said is like we cannot approach these elections as a foregone conclusion. We must get out there and tell the story of our candidates, tell the story of the future, and connect with voters on the issues they say that they care most about. We have done that. We did that in 2024. Our results were different and in many cases better than the top of the ticket. We've extended that approach into these special elections, protecting majorities, breaking Republican supermajorities, and flipping Trump districts. And then we land at last night's election, again, carrying this very disciplined, very focused, very strategic campaign plan into these off-year elections. And we are continuing to see results. That to me is the biggest thing. And at no point can we sit back and say, like, the environment is great, the top of the ticket is doing really well, we can just ride this wave. That is both unacceptable and that is not a winning strategy. So when I think about what it takes to compete in 2026 and 2028, I think about that as the foundation. The other thing that I will say about these upcoming elections, and this has been threaded through this a little bit as we think about the redistricting fight, but state legislatures are the foundation for so much that happens up and down the ballot. Obviously, it is the states that determine our voting laws and access to the ballot box. But we also know that the path to the presidency will be secured, and that peaceful transition of power will be secured through state legislatures. We know that the governor's veto pen in states like North Carolina is determined by Democrats in the state legislature. We know that Governor-elect Spanberger's agenda is going to be run through a Democratic state legislature. So our connected future is incredibly clear. And for Democrats, like, if we are going to win intentional power in the election we are in and for the future, what is happening in the states and building power in state legislatures must be a part of that process.
I love it. This next question comes from Alex Marquez over at NBC. Virginia Democrats have been vocal in their support of redrawing congressional district lines in their state ahead of Election Day. Did you find any evidence last night that your overperformance in these legislative elections was a vote of support from residents for the redistricting push specifically?
Well, that's an interesting question, Alex. I think the biggest takeaway from voters, and this is not to say that they are like a perfect monolith, but I think the biggest thing that voters are concerned about remains like affordability. And that really was the driver. We've seen it all year. Do I think that there is a coalition of people who feel really strongly about what it has meant for Republicans to try to force themselves into power and not feel like the voters play any role of that? Sure, I think there's certainly like people who are turned off by that. But I think from the electoral sort of campaign environment, the focus really was on the kitchen table issues through the lens of affordability, and that's what drove our candidates to success.
Next one comes from Stephanie over at Pluribus. Any thoughts on what propelled Democrats to break the supermajority in the Mississippi Senate and what that could mean for issues coming up in the legislature next year, particularly around Medicaid expansion?
We talked just a tiny bit about this a moment ago. Obviously, there was a map redraw in Mississippi, which was impactful. We know when there are representative maps and there is a process that actually gives voters a choice in who their elected officials are, that we can connect with voters and win. And I think Mississippi was a prime example of that. I will also say that we have had really incredible candidates raise their hand to run for office. We saw in Virginia some repeat candidates who were successful last night. We also saw a wide slate of, frankly, like just normal middle-class Americans raising their hand to run for office to fight for a different future. And That was also the case in Mississippi, and I think that having authentic candidates who are really of the community looking to move into public office and to do their best in their state house on behalf of their community is important to voters, and they are connecting well with that at our ballot level.
Excellent. I know we're coming up close to 11:30, so this is likely the last question we have time for. But reporters, you all have my contact info. Please feel free to follow up with me after this. But rounding things out with Grace Panetta over at the 19th, we saw women candidates at the forefront of a lot of big wins last night, including in the Virginia House of Delegates. What takeaways are there about how women uniquely message on affordability and healthcare looking ahead to 2026?
I mean, the women were great last night. I think I'm gonna take just like one step back on this question, Grace, and then I'll maybe come a little more specifically to it. I think what has like always been incredible about our ballot level is so many people get an opportunity to run for office for the first time or be an elected official for the first time. And we see such a diversity of candidates because we're competing in all kinds of communities. We've got, young generational candidates. We've got women. We've got, all sort of religions, all backgrounds, all experiences, and it really does make for an incredible like representation of this country, and it's frankly what Democrats like look and can be. I think, on the women question specifically, I think we've had just really smart, strong, authentic leaders and women who have run for office and who are leading both these new governors that were just elected. But if you look across our state legislatures, we've had strong women leaders in so many of our legislative chambers, the Pennsylvania House, the Michigan Senate, the Minnesota Senate, so many strong women who are able to both connect directly and authentically and honestly with voters about the dimensional affordability crisis that people are feeling. They are able to lead in a way that is connected and focused. And I just think that they have been strong communicators. So we're really excited about what this means. We also know that we're going to have a great slate of all kinds of candidates next year that we'll be very excited to share more about.
Excellent. With that, we can wrap things up. Again, I'm sorry that we didn't get to quite all of the questions in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me at paisley@dlcc.org, and I will happy to be chase down any of your inquiries. Thank you, Heather, to making the time. Thank you, everyone, for making the time on the heels of such a busy night. More to come soon, and hope everyone can get some rest soon. Thank you.